Liam is a single father who is ready to give up everything in the city just to give his little girl a warm home, a vast place to play, and a garden filled with sunshine and birdsong. He worked tirelessly to rebuild the old farmhouse left by his grandfather, pouring every last cent of his savings into this sanctuary. But will he and his daughter ever find peace in this house? Relatives who ignored him for 10 long years have suddenly appeared with legal battles. Will they force this father and daughter to leave the only home they love? Can a single father protect his child's future when his own family turns their backs on him? Or do his grandfather's last words hold a secret power no one expected? Join us to see if they will be forced to depart or if a miracle is waiting to appear. Before we continue, please support us by subscribing to the channel. The air in Chicago did not move. It just sat there, heavy, thick with the scent of hot asphalt and the metallic tang of exhaust fumes. Inside the tiny third-floor apartment, the heat was a physical weight. Liam stood by the window. He watched the shimmering haze rise from the street below. From the small bedroom, he heard it again, a sharp, dry, hollow cough. It was followed by a ragged intake of breath. Then another cough. It sounded far too heavy for a 3-year-old girl. Liam turned away from the window. He walked quickly to the bedside where Chloe lay. Her small face was flushed. Her golden curls were damp with sweat clinging to her forehead like wilted silk. "Daddy." It hurts to breathe. Her voice was a thin whisper. It broke Liam's heart into 1,000 jagged pieces. He looked at the nightstand. It was cluttered with plastic amber bottles. There were inhalers. There were syrups. There were crumpled receipts from the specialist they had seen last week. Each one was a reminder of his failure. He worked 60 hours a week at the firm. He crunched numbers and managed accounts until his eyes blurred into a dull ache. Yet the mountain of medical bills only grew taller. The city was winning. He walked back to the kitchen table. He sat down and stared at a stack of white envelopes. Overdue. Final notice. Urgent. The concrete skyline outside the window felt like the bars of a cage. There was no green here. There was no wind. There was only the endless mechanical hum of air conditioners and the distant lonely scream of sirens. He closed his eyes. Suddenly, a memory surfaced, a memory from a decade ago. He was standing on a wooden porch in the countryside. The air there smelled like cut grass and rain. His grandpa Silas had leaned on his cane and looked out over the rolling hills of the valley. Silas had grabbed Liam's hand with a grip that was still strong. "The farmhouse is yours, Liam. I am leaving it to you." The old man had looked toward the horizon, where the sun was setting in a sky of pure gold. "This world is getting too fast, too dirty. If you ever feel like you are drowning, boy, you come back here. It is a place to breathe." Liam opened his eyes. He looked at the peeling gray walls of the apartment. A decade had passed since that day. 10 years of chasing a career. 10 years of trying to be a success in the heart of the machine. He looked at Chloe. She was struggling again. Her small chest rose and fell in a jagged, desperate rhythm. He realized then that he was trading his daughter's life for a paycheck. He stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the linoleum floor. It was a sudden, violent clarity. He grabbed his laptop. He opened his email. With trembling fingers, he typed a short message to his boss. "I quit. Effective immediately." He did not feel fear. He did not feel regret. He only felt a strange, soaring lightness in his chest. He began to pack. He did not take much. He took Chloe's favorite stuffed rabbit, He took a box of old photographs. He took the deed to the farm that had been sitting in the back of a drawer for 10 long years. By dawn, the old SUV was loaded. The sun began to rise over the lake. It was a dull orange ball obscured by a thick layer of smog. Liam strapped Chloe into her car seat. She was pale, but she managed a tiny brave smile for him. "Where are we going, Daddy?" Liam started the engine. The old car rumbled to life. "We are going to find the wind. Chloe." He put the car into gear. He drove away from the skyscrapers. He drove away from the noise and the dust. He drove until the gray concrete began to give way to patches of yellow grass and wildflowers. The city faded in the rearview mirror. For the first time in years, Liam took a deep breath. The road ahead was long. The farmhouse was likely falling apart. He had very little money left in his bank account, but as the first green trees appeared on the horizon, he knew. They were finally going home. The gravel road seemed to go on forever. It wound through rolling hills that transitioned from a dusty brown to a deep, vibrant green. Liam gripped the steering wheel. His hands were tired. His eyes were heavy from the long drive away from the city. Beside him, Chloe was fast asleep. For the first time in months, her breathing was quiet. There was no whistling sound in her lungs, no struggle for air. Then he saw it. At the end of a long lane guarded by ancient oak trees stood the farmhouse. Liam slowed the car to a crawl. He felt a lump form in his throat as the structure came into view. The house was a wreck. Wild vines had climbed the white siding like green fingers trying to pull the building back into the earth. The porch sagged heavily on the left side. Several shingles had blown off the roof during some forgotten storm. The windows looked like hollow eyes staring out at a world that had moved on without them. It looked lonely. It looked abandoned. Liam stepped out of the car. The silence was the first thing he noticed. It was not the empty silence of a vacuum. It was a living silence. He took a long, deep breath. The air did not taste like metal or smoke. It tasted like damp earth and wild clover. It was cool. It was crisp. It was perfect. He looked back at his sleeping daughter in the back seat. "I do not care if the roof leaks," he whispered to the wind. "We are staying." The first month was a blur of sweat and sore muscles. Liam used his life savings to buy lumber-fresh paint and heavy tools. He had been an accountant in the city, but here he became a builder. He learned how to fix things by trial and error. Mostly error. He spent his mornings on the roof. He hammered new shingles into place under the warm sun. The rhythm of the hammer became the heartbeat of his new life. He spent his afternoons in the meadows. He swung a scythe through the tall, dry grass until his arms ached. Slowly, the house began to change. The gray, peeling wood of the porch was replaced with sturdy cedar. He painted the exterior a soft, welcoming white. He mended the picket fence until it stood straight and proud once again. But the most beautiful change was not the house. It was Chloe. Within 2 weeks of breathing, the country air, her persistent cough simply vanished. The dark circles under her eyes faded away. Her skin, once as pale as a city sidewalk, took on a healthy, rosy glow. She spent her days outside. She chased butterflies through the tall grass. She collected smooth stones from the creek. She was becoming a child of the earth. One afternoon, Liam took Chloe to a local animal shelter in the nearby town. That was the day they met Cooper. Cooper was a senior golden retriever with a graying muzzle and eyes that held a world of kindness. He had been found wandering the woods alone. When Chloe walked up to his kennel, the big dog did not bark. He simply sat down and offered a heavy fur-covered paw. Chloe giggled. It was a bright musical sound that filled the quiet room. "He likes me, Daddy. Can he come home?" Cooper became their shadow. When Liam painted the fence, Cooper sat nearby in the shade. When Chloe played in her new sandbox, Cooper rested his chin on her boots. The dog seemed to understand that they were all healing together. By the time autumn arrived, the transformation was complete. The farmhouse no longer looked like a ghost. It looked like a sanctuary. Liam stood in the kitchen one evening. The room smelled of fresh pine needles and wood smoke. A hearty stew was simmering on the stove, sending curls of steam into the air. Outside, the sun was dipping below the horizon. It painted the sky in shades of violet and gold. He looked out the window and saw Chloe and Cooper running through the meadow. The dog's tail wagged like a flag. Chloe's laughter carried on the breeze, clear and joyful. Liam leaned against the counter. He thought about his old life. He thought about the gray cubicles and the endless traffic jams. It felt like a dream from a different lifetime. He had less money now. His hands were calloused and his back often hurt from the labor. But he was no longer trapped. He looked at the portrait of Grandpa Silas hanging in the hallway. He touched the wooden frame with a silent thank you. The house was no longer just a building of wood and nails. It was a home. It was a place where they could finally truly breathe. Peace has a way of feeling permanent when you are finally happy. For 2 years, Liam believed the world had finally left them alone. The garden was thriving. The apple trees were heavy with fruit. Chloe was growing tall and strong. Cooper had claimed his favorite spot on the porch, where the morning sun hit the floorboards just right. But then the news arrived. It started with a small headline in the local Gazette. By the end of the week, it was the only thing anyone talked about in town. A massive international airport project had been approved for the valley. The location was less than 5 miles from the farmhouse gate. Overnight, the quiet country roads were crawling with men in dark suits. They carried clipboards and surveying equipment. The value of the land did not just rise. It exploded. Liam watched the black SUVs drive past his gate. He felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his stomach. He knew the world of greed was knocking on his door. One Tuesday morning, the peace was shattered. The sound of tires crunching on gravel echoed through the quiet air. 4 luxury cars pulled into the driveway. They were shiny. They were expensive. They looked completely out of place against the rustic backdrop of the farm. Liam stood on the porch. He wiped his hands on a grease-stained rag. Out of the cars stepped his 2 uncles, Marcus and Howard. Behind them were his aunts Sarah and Deborah. He had not heard a single word from them in a decade, not since the day they buried Grandpa Silas. There had been no birthday cards for Chloe, no phone calls to check on his well-being. "Liam, you have done a decent job with the place." Uncle Marcus spoke first. He did not offer a handshake. He just looked at the freshly painted siding with a calculating eye. "We are here to discuss the sale," Aunt Sarah added. She was busy checking her reflection in the car window. Liam felt a flash of anger. "The house is not for sale," he said. His voice was low and steady. "Grandpa Silas gave this place to me. He wanted me to keep it in the family." Marcus let out a short, dry laugh. He might have said that, Liam, but talk is cheap. They marched into the house as if they still lived there. They sat around the kitchen table that Liam had spent weeks refinishing. "We have been talking to the developers," Howard said. "They are offering a fortune for this acreage. If we sell now, each of us walks away with enough to retire comfortably." Liam looked at them. He saw only numbers in their eyes. "This is Chloe's home," Liam argued. "This is where she recovered. This is our life." "It does not matter," Deborah snapped. "The law is the law." A week later, they all met in a sterile office in the city. A man named Mr. Henderson sat behind a heavy oak desk. He was the estate lawyer. He looked at Liam with a sympathetic expression. "I have reviewed all the documents, Liam." The room was silent. Liam could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. "Grandpa Silas clearly intended for you to have the house. I remember him mentioning it many times before he passed away." Liam felt a spark of hope. "However," Mr. Henderson continued, "there is no written will. There is no signed deed of gift. In the eyes of the law, the verbal promise of a deceased person holds no weight against the rights of the direct heirs." Liam felt the blood drain from his face. "Since your mother passed away, her share goes to you. That means you own exactly 1/5 of this property." The 4 siblings leaned forward. They were smiling now. Because the others want to liquidate their shares, the law requires the property to be sold at market value. The proceeds will then be divided 5 ways. "Is there no other way?" Liam asked. His voice cracked. "You could buy them out," the lawyer said softly. Liam knew the answer before he even calculated the numbers. With the airport project nearby, the land was now worth millions. He was a man with a small savings account and a heart full of hope. He did not have millions. "I cannot afford it," Liam whispered. The aunts and uncles stood up. They smoothed their expensive clothes. "We will give you 30 days to vacate," Marcus said. "We want the listing to go live while the market is at its peak." They walked out of the office without looking back. Liam remained in his chair. The room felt like it was spinning. He thought of the porch he had built with his own hands. He thought of the tire swing he had hung for Chloe. He thought of the silence of the woods at dawn. It was all being stripped away. He drove back to the farm in a daze. When he pulled into the driveway, Cooper ran out to meet him. Chloe was sitting on the steps, holding a handful of wildflowers. "Hi, Daddy. Look what I found." Liam looked at his daughter. He looked at the rosy health of her cheeks. He sat down on the dirt driveway and pulled her into a hug. He held her so tight that she giggled in confusion. He looked up at the house. The white paint seemed to glow in the twilight. It was a sanctuary. It was a miracle. And in 30 days, it would belong to a bulldozer. The sky over the valley was the color of lead. A cold autumn wind moaned through the bare branches of the oak trees. It was a hollow sound, a sound that echoed the emptiness inside the house. On the front lawn, the for sale sign stood like a cold metal sentinel. It was hammered deep into the earth that Liam had spent 2 years nurturing. Liam stood on the porch. He held 2 heavy suitcases. His knuckles were white. Everything was packed. The furniture had been hauled away. The kitchen was a shell of its former self. The scent of pine and stew had been replaced by the smell of cold dust and finality. Beside him, Chloe stood very still. She clutched her stuffed rabbit to her chest. She did not ask questions. Children have a way of sensing when the world is breaking. "Are we leaving now?" "Daddy?" Her voice was small. It was a tiny flame in a great dark forest. Liam looked down at her. He tried to smile, but his face felt like stone. Yes, sweetie, it is time. He looked toward the horizon. In the distance, he could hear the low, mechanical rumble of the bulldozers. They were already clearing the land for the new runway. Soon, the meadows where Chloe ran would be covered in black asphalt. The house he had saved from the vines would be a pile of splinters. It felt like a betrayal. He felt as if he were walking away from Grandpa Silas himself. "Let's go to the car," Liam whispered. They walked down the wooden steps. Each footfall sounded like a drum in the silence. Liam opened the back of the SUV and loaded the suitcases. He buckled Chloe into her car seat. Then he looked for Cooper. The old dog was not by the car. He was not on the porch. Liam looked toward the house. The basement door was swinging open in the wind. Cooper, Liam called out. His voice was raw. "Come on, boy. We have to leave." There was no response, only the whistling of the wind. Liam sighed and walked back toward the house. He stepped into the dim, cool light of the basement. The air was damp. In the far corner, near the stone foundation, he heard a sound. It was a frantic scratching. Cooper was there. The old golden retriever was digging at the floorboards with a strength that should have been impossible for his age. He was barking. It was not a happy bark. It was a sharp, urgent cry. "Cooper, stop it!" Liam shouted. "We don't have time for this." He grabbed the dog's collar to pull him away, but Cooper wouldn't budge. He planted his paws and growled low in his throat. He kept snapping his teeth at a specific plank behind the old water heater. The dog looked at Liam. His dark eyes were pleading. He whined and scratched again, his claws clicking against the wood. Liam paused. He looked at the floorboard. It was an old piece of heart pine. It was tucked away in a corner he had never touched during the renovations. It was too dark, too narrow. He knelt down beside the dog. He touched the edge of the board. It was loose. Liam pulled a small crowbar from his back pocket. He had forgotten he was even carrying it. He wedged the metal tip into the crack. The wood groaned. With a sharp crack, the board popped upward. Liam pulled it away. Beneath the floor was not dirt. It was a hollow, dry compartment. It was lined with cedar, kept perfectly preserved by the thick stone of the house. Inside sat a small, tarnished tin box. Cooper stopped barking. He sat back on his haunches and let out a long, soft huff of breath. Liam's heart began to hammer against his ribs. His hands trembled as he reached into the dark space. He pulled the box out. It was heavy. He wiped the thick dust from the lid with his sleeve. There, etched into the metal, were the initials S.W. Silas Walters. Liam sat on the cold basement floor. He forgot about the car. He forgot about the suitcases. He forgot about the aunts and uncles waiting for their checks. He opened the lid. The smell of old paper and cedar filled the air. On top was a stack of black and white photographs. One showed his mother as a young girl laughing in the meadow. But beneath the photos lay a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with red wax. On the front, in his grandfather's shaky but bold handwriting, were the words, "For Liam. When the world tries to take what is yours." Liam tore the envelope open. His eyes blurred with tears as he read the first few lines. It was a formal document. It was stamped with a notary seal from the year 2015. It was the last will and testament of Silas Walters. Liam let out a sob that was half a laugh. He looked at Cooper. The dog was licking his hand. "You knew," Liam whispered. "You knew it was here all along." The engine of the SUV was still idling in the driveway. Chloe was waiting. The for sale sign was still mocking him from the lawn, but everything had changed. Liam stood up. He tucked the tin box under his arm. He felt a surge of fire in his chest. He walked out of the basement and into the gray light of the afternoon. He walked to the edge of the lawn. He grabbed the cold metal post of the for sale sign. With one violent tug, he ripped it out of the earth. He threw it into the tall grass. "We aren't leaving, Chloe," he shouted toward the car. He ran to the SUV and unbuckled his daughter. He pulled her into his arms and spun her around. "We are staying home." High above the clouds began to break. A single beam of autumn sunlight hit the white porch of the farmhouse. It looked like gold. Liam sat on the cold basement floor. The shadows of the afternoon stretched long across the stone walls. In his lap sat the tarnished tin box. It was heavy. It felt as though it held the weight of an entire lifetime. Beside him, Cooper sat perfectly still. The old dog breathed softly, watching Liam with eyes that seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. Liam reached out. His fingers were trembling. He slowly lifted the lid. The first thing he saw was a stack of old Polaroid photographs. He picked them up with a delicate touch. In the first photo, a young woman stood in the middle of the apple orchard. She was laughing, her hair caught in a summer breeze. It was his mother. She looked so full of life. She looked like she belonged to the earth of this valley. Liam flipped through the images. There were photos of him as a small boy, sitting on Grandpa Silas's shoulders. There were pictures of the house during a winter storm. Every photo was a testament to love. Every image shouted that this was not just a piece of real estate. This was a sanctuary. Beneath the photographs, he found a handwritten letter. The paper was yellowed at the edges and smelled of cedar and old memories. "My dearest Liam," the letter began. The handwriting was shaky, but bold. Liam could almost hear his grandfather's raspy voice in his head. "I knew my own children," Silas wrote. "I knew their hearts were turned toward the glitter of gold. I knew they would look at this land and see only a bank account. I knew that if they found my will, they would find a way to make it vanish." Liam paused. He took a shaky breath. "But you, Liam, you are different. You see the soul of this place. I knew that only someone who truly cared for the bones of this house would ever find this box." Liam reached the bottom of the tin. There lay a thick blue folder. He pulled it out. It was a formal document bound in a protective sleeve. At the top, in large stern letters, it read, "Last Will and Testament." Liam's heart thundered in his ears. He turned the pages. His eyes scanned the legal language until they stopped on a paragraph that changed everything. "I, Silas Walters, do hereby leave the entirety of my estate to my grandson Liam." The words were absolute. But there was more. Silas had known about the world outside. He had known about the developers and the march of progress. The document contained a specific ironclad clause. The property is to be held in a perpetual land trust. It shall never be sold for commercial development. It shall never be used for industrial purposes. This land belongs to the family and to the earth. Liam let out a sob. It was a sound of pure relief. This was the shield. This was the weapon he needed to stop the bulldozers. Silas had anticipated the greed of his children years before it even happened. He had built a legal fortress around the meadow where Chloe now played. Liam held the folder against his chest. He closed his eyes. "Thank you, Grandpa," he whispered. He climbed the basement stairs. He stepped out onto the porch. Chloe was still sitting in her car seat. She looked confused. Liam walked to the SUV and unbuckled her seatbelt. "No, Chloe. We are staying." He pointed toward the meadow. He pointed to the oak trees and the white fence. "This is ours. Forever." Liam went inside. He grabbed the telephone. He dialed the number for Mr. Henderson, the estate lawyer. "Mr. Henderson, this is Liam." His voice was like iron. "I found it. The notarized will. The land trust clause." He heard the lawyer catch his breath. "If that is true, Liam, then the sale is over. The developers cannot touch that land." "I want you to call my uncles," Liam said. "Tell them to stay off my property. Tell them the gates are locked." He hung up the phone. He walked to the window. The sun was setting behind the hills. The sky was a riot of orange and deep red. The shadow of greed was long, but the light of the truth was stronger. He was home. The morning sun climbed slowly over the horizon. It touched the white walls of the farmhouse with a gentle, golden light. Liam stood on the gravel driveway. He was not alone. Mr. Henderson stood beside him. The lawyer held a thick stack of papers bound in a formal blue ribbon, a few yards away. The 4 luxury cars were back, but this time, the people inside were not smiling. Uncle Marcus stepped out of his vehicle. His face was red with anger. He gestured wildly toward the open meadows. "This is ridiculous." "Liam," he shouted, "you are throwing away millions for a pile of old wood and some dirt." Liam did not flinch. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at his uncle with a calm, steady gaze. It was never about the money. "Marcus, it was about a promise." Mr. Henderson stepped forward. He cleared his throat. The sound was sharp in the quiet morning air. "I have served the court injunction to the developers," the lawyer said, "because of the land trust established by Silas Walters. This farm is now a protected historical site." He turned to the aunts and the uncles. "The airport project is being relocated 10 miles to the north. And as for this property, you have no claim here. Not now, not ever." One by one. The relatives retreated. They slunk back into their expensive cars. They drove away, leaving nothing behind but a lingering cloud of dust. Liam watched them go. He felt a heavy chain fall away from his heart. The air was still. The birds began to sing in the apple trees. The threat was gone. By late afternoon, the valley had returned to its peaceful rhythm. The developers had taken their heavy equipment away. The silence was deep and beautiful. Liam walked to the porch. He sat down on the top step. In the meadow. Chloe was running. Her laughter was like silver bells ringing in the wind. She was healthy. She was strong. Cooper was right at her side. The old dog leaped through the tall grass with the energy of a puppy. Liam leaned back against the porch railing. He looked at his hands. They were rough and scarred from months of hard work, but they had saved a home. The sun began to dip behind the purple hills. The sky turned into a vast canvas of gold, orange, and deep violet. It was a beautiful sunset. Liam looked over at the corner of the porch. There sat Grandpa Silas's old wooden rocking chair. A soft breeze blew across the meadow. It caught the back of the chair. The chair began to sway, back and forth, back and forth. Liam smiled. He took a deep, clean breath of country air. The legacy was safe, and they were finally, truly, home.
In the end, we learned that a house is only built of wood and stone, but a home is crafted from the promises we keep and the love we refuse to give up on. True legacy is not found in a bank account, but in the healthy laughter of a child and the quiet peace of knowing you belong somewhere. If this story touched your heart, please tell us where you are watching from today in the comments, whether it is your quiet hometown or a busy city. We would be honored to have you join our family by subscribing for more touching tales, and please click the video on your screen now to discover our latest journey together.